Marcus, I've been lucky. I've worked in a lot of different places, but whenever I work in America and Canada, there are so many different names for completion. There's TCO, there's substantial performance, there's 12-month liability period, there's practical completion. So just run me through the various levels of completion and what they mean.
I haven't heard those other couple ones, but the ones that we deal with over here a lot, obviously, is TCO, C of O, substantial completion. So the major ones is like, temporary certificate of occupation, like a TCO. So that is pretty much saying that the building's safe, for people to be in. I'm not going to go crazy with it. It's like, okay, so you have your ASHRAEs, you've checked your elevators, your escalators, you've checked your electricals, you've checked your fire, your smoke, your panels, your management. So safety, right? So, okay, TCO, your building is safe to enter. So some people would then say, okay, so I can move in. You're like, well, no, but yes, but you could start, So then they'll say, okay, well, Marcus, I want to have commissioning done by substantial completion. You're like, that's the goal, right? By the goal, right? You have your date, right? That's like substantial completion. It's like, there's your turnover, right? So if everything started early, controls and this and this and this, yes, right? So, but the thing about it is, what always gets pushed to the end, it's always the truth, like tab, all the other programming, controlling, right? So it's just like I tell people all the time, yes, your building is running. Is it dialed in? No. They're like, what does that mean? I'm like, it hasn't been perfectly tabbed. We don't have all the perfect controls. And not perfect, I don't like that word. There's no perfect, right? Yeah. So, per the intent, it's just like it runs, but it's not dialed in. Because a lot of the times, especially with COVID and supply chain, things are late, things are this, sometimes there's panels, there's BFDs, there's temporary showing up 6 months from now, right? So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to make it work. So these words, TCO, C of O, substantial completion, they're always coming up, and you're the commissioning person. You're always trying to balance this, right? And once again, you don't do the blame game, okay? Everybody does the blame game, right? But if everybody has done their job throughout the entire area, and commissioning and controls and MEP and engineering and CM, if we've all worked together, we know that there's issues. It's called the log. We've documented them. We know exactly where we are. We have our meetings and we keep on hitting them, right? And the goal is to hit that substantial completion. Yes. Why? Why is it so important? Yeah, they're moving in, but warranty, right? So warranty is usually like from time of delivery, you get, 18 months, or you get 12 months after substantial completion. Like the last 3 years is totally throwing those out of the books. You can get more warranty. It's caused so many problems, but that's how it starts, right? And so we're all trying to hit those dates. And then we're all trying to basically say, did the dates move? What are the dates? And I know that's almost like as clear as mud, but it's a conversation that comes up every time. It comes up in interviews. It comes up at the table. Yeah. It causes arguments, and everybody's doing their best. And I wish more conversation was talked about this in the design charrette or in the OPR or early to basically safeguard what happens.
Yeah. So to bring this to the design charrette or the kickoff meeting, I like to try and get agreed commissioning milestones in there, right? So take TCO, temporary certificate of occupation, right? For me, that's the life safety. That's the bare minimum before you let Joe Public in, right? Substantial completion, also known as substantial performance in Canada, and practical completion in the UK for our international listeners. That is when you can let people in and the building is generally fit for purpose and use, right? So people can move in, you can start the fit out, or people can move into an open plan office, right? And then that kicks in the 12 months defects liability period. So there, there's 3 levels here. There's temporary certificate of occupation, which is the bare minimum. There's practical completion or substantial performance. And then there's like the 12-month liability period. At the end of that, in theory, all the defects are done. Everyone goes their own way, updates their LinkedIn profile, and we're good, right? But as a commissioning provider, particularly if you're on a new construction job, you have to understand what that means for you and your scope of work. But then 3 things, right? So the first one, temporary certificate of operation, That's a life safety thing, right? That's a focus on, is this building safe to let people in? And then like substantial completion or substantial performance. That is like, it's a building fit for use, right? If there's a data center in it, is this data center up and ready?
But there's also the issues, like this always comes up when you're a commissioning person, right? You're in there, you pointed them out, you put them down, you basically say, what is it, who's the responsible party, where we're at. And believe it or not, a lot of times owners are pushing you to close them. And you're like,
oh yeah,
they're not closed, right? So I'm like, you sign off, it's done. It stays, it stays open until we work through it. Sometimes they stay open in perpetuity. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes we stay back, but you have that word retention. You know what I mean? Like people leave the building. Elvis has left the building, right? It is so hard to get people back, but we got to keep on going back until it's done. You know what I mean? But that is not just a slam the hammer and say, do it. Like it starts way in the middle and the beginning to basically what happens at the end and what is the contingencies and what are the plans.
In North America and Canada, like substantial performance or substantial completion is a definition of it in the engineering, licensing professions and various boards, and it becomes almost a calculation based on like progress and money. In other parts of the world, it's just in the gift of the engineers and architects in their opinion, right? But you should be very careful as an architect and engineer, granted substantial, because once you do that, it releases half the retentions and people start going. And I've known loads of contractors in North America just walked away and say, "I keep the retention, we're done, see ya."
Yeah.
Right? And so you've got to be careful how you give that out. You've got to guard it. It's got to be real, which means you've got to document it and be clear on what's included.
Pay app's got to be right. Everything's got to be right because we want to finish the work. We want to turn over a good build. It's not like we're trying not to turn over a good building. When we're almost crying at night going, I want to finish, because you don't want to have that blemish, and someone like me, I always go back. Because that client is my friend. I don't want to let them down.
So this is my Mexican standoff theory of contracting, right? So you start a job, you got the owner, the design team, the construction team, and they're sort of like, it's almost like, it's a bit like the law, it's adversarial in a way. It's not meant to be, but it becomes that way, right? But then at the end, the construction team and the owner's interests align in that they both want that building done. The construction team want to get away and the owner wants someone in there paying rent. So this Mexican standoff happens. There's like guns in a circle, right? And as the construction team and the owner's team interests align, if you're on that design team and you're the person granting substantial, good luck trying to resist that alignment of interests. It's tough, but as a commissioning provider or as a project manager, you need clarity about, I always advise defining these things clear as possible early in the documents.
And the last thing you want to do, people seem to realize that, you're throwing out a CO, a change order. Everybody thinks that, just throw out more money. The last thing I want to do is ask for more money. The only time, I do it when I'm like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's not what we try to do every time. It's not. And it shouldn't be, truthfully.
Yeah. So, the takeaway from this conversation is, Marcus and I here are talking from deep, bitter experience of unfinished buildings. So, the answer to these issues is clarity in definitions and requirements. And then that way it should become a test of, do you meet that definition?
And just responsibility and accountability. And honestly, the last thing I'm going to say, and the first thing I'm going to say is teamwork. Yeah. And if you're all on the same team trying to cross the finish line together, I say this all the time, it's just stop. You know what I mean? Like, get together, do it, get it done, get the team, get out there and figure it out, and you can come up with solutions.
Yeah, absolutely.